Hello, my name is Ian. I am an accessibility specialist and I am also Tara's co-conspirator for putting on the event today and tomorrow. And we're going to kick things off as we always do with a news update. So look at some of the interesting things that have been happening in the field of gaming accessibility since our last event back in October. But before I do that, I'm going to give a little shout out to some charities and non-profits. So there's a few on the screen now. Able Gamers, Special Effect, Warfighter Engaged, Everyone Can, Lifelights, NMA Gaming, Cap Game, Handy Gamers, Stack Up, Child's Play, Get Well Gamers, The Rockin' R. Charities and non-profits across the entire sector, not just in gaming, have been hit really hard by the pandemic, especially the smaller ones, because a lot of the traditional fundraising activities are things that would normally be in person, which can't happen at the moment. And a lot of these are local to you as well. So for example, Everyone Can is in Manchester, Special Effect in Banbury, Handy Gamers and Cap Game in Paris. So I'd really urge you to, if it's within your means, to donate and give your support to the missions of these organisations, because they all do tremendous work in the field of gaming accessibility and the industry, and none of us would be where we are today if it wasn't for the work that they do. So please support their missions if you can. So on with the news. Where are things now? Well, where we're starting from was the last event we put on, which was back in October. At that point, The Last of Us 2 had recently launched and made a huge splash. With good reasons. It's already proving to be a hugely influential game. And The Last of Us 2 is a product of a journey that is really common for studios across the board. So how it started was with their previous game, the previous game that Naughty Dog put out, which was Uncharted 4. Uncharted 4 was released in 2016. That was a hugely influential game at its time. It had a feature set largely aimed at motor accessibility, covering things that are becoming commonplace now, like QuickTime event toggles and things like that. And how it came about was a very common scenario for studios that are just kind of dipping their toe in the water of accessibility for the first time, which was a few people in the company who are really passionate about accessibility, who managed to get a few features in at the last minute. So it was actually just within the last few months, just before launch. And it launched to huge acclaim and all the rest of it. But the reaction from the developers, as it always is with companies at that stage, was, oh my God, if we had just thought about this earlier, we could have done so much more, we could have done it so much better. So that's what they did. At that stage, The Last of Us 2 was in the early stages of development. So they were able to think about accessibility early. They worked directly with the community, with consultants, with guidelines and best practices. And what they ended up with was a game which is not the end point of where accessibility needs to get to, but it pushed the bar a long way, including being the first AAA game that was designed from the ground up to be fully playable by people who are completely blind. So that was a big splash. What does a post Last of Us 2 world look like? It turns out it looks pretty good, and part of that actually is I think illustrated by this event itself. This is the first time that we've actually been able to put together a properly localized set of content. So we actually made an exception for Xbox because they have some really cool stuff to be able to talk about tomorrow. But apart from that, all of the talks that you're going to see over today and tomorrow are all from speakers around Europe. That's the first time we've been able to do this. So it wasn't too long ago that even just being able to get one single basic awareness raising talk about accessibility onto the lineup of any game development event was a really big deal. So to progress from that to where we are today, of being able to actually populate a full 2 days of content just on the cool stuff that's happening around Europe, is a really lovely milestone for us as the event, obviously, but also I think a nice indication of the progress that's being made across the industry in general. So I'm going to talk to you about a few different topic areas. This is non-exhaustive. It's just a few highlights of some interesting things that have happened in advancements in hardware, in terms of information available to both gamers and developers, progress made in games themselves, and also finishing up on a nice little bit of stuff about awards. So starting with hardware. The big hardware news of the past 6 months was obviously the arrival of these two, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and S. So what did this mean for accessibility? Well, both platforms actually pushed the bar forwards for accessibility, but in very, very different ways, actually in kind of the opposite ways. So what PlayStation did was launch with a swathe of new accessibility functionality. So this was in part at the hardware level. So the controller itself has really detailed new haptics that have already been put to good use for accessibility in Spider-Man Miles Morales in particular. That game has a load of nice detailed haptics, optional haptics, to reinforce what's happening visually for people who might not be able to see or understand that visual information as clearly. There was also a bunch of new stuff happening at operating system level, features present on the PlayStation 5 that weren't present on the PlayStation 4. In particular, the screen reader. So this is system level text-to-speech for people who have difficulty or cannot see the text of the interface. And this is something that blind gamers have been crying out for years. So it's really wonderful to see this happen. And it's a really nice implementation as well. Really, really solid functionality and localized into tons of languages as well. And I know this was no small feat at all to get this done. So big congratulations to all the people that I know were involved in pushing hard to be able to make this happen. So then we come to the Xbox. The Xbox innovated by keeping things the same. So that might sound like a bit of a strange concept, but bear with me. So this covers two things. Firstly, they actually managed to fully replicate and maintain the existing accessibility feature set from the previous generation, which may kind of seem like a given, but it's actually pretty rare. Not just in gaming, but in other industries as well, for like a new generation of hardware to come out and it to actually manage to keep all the accessibility functionality the previous one did in the rush to the new shiny, you know. So they managed to do that. But the really important thing is about the controller. So the controller is backwards compatible. Controllers for the Xbox One also work on the Xbox Series S and X. And the reason why this is so important for accessibility is because assistive technology, like custom devices that people often need to buy to be able to access technology, is really expensive. So this backwards compatibility means that if you spend hundreds or even thousands of pounds, euros, dollars on custom gaming equipment to be able to access that platform, you can actually just bring that straight across the new platform without having to start again and spend all that money all over again. This is really, really wonderful to see. It's where I'd really love to get to is this is a pie in the sky dream, I know, but back in the days of the 1990s, where there wasn't just compatibility between generations but between platforms as well. There was just like an open standard 9-pin controller. You could pick up a controller from a Sega Master System, plug it into an Atari ST, and it worked, you know. I don't think we'll realistically be able to get to that point again because of the commercial sensibilities involved, but just that compatibility across the generations is a bit of a step towards that kind of openness that is so useful for people with disabilities. So it's really, really lovely to see that. Aside from the two big launches, the other platforms have been doing nice things as well. Starting with Stadia. So Stadia gains a feature called Tandem. Tandem is basically an equivalent to the Xbox's Copilot functionality. Copilot and Tandem both allow you to connect two controllers and have both of those controllers be recognized as the same controller. It has a wide range of accessibility benefits. The reason that functionality was actually designed was as a way to split areas of the controller between different parts of the same body. So you could, for example, have one controller in your left hand controlling the left hand side of it, Have another controller on the floor, controlling the right-hand side of that controller with your foot. It has other benefits as well. It makes devices like the Xbox Adaptive Controller much more effective and much more affordable as well, because by pairing it with a regular controller, that means instead of having to buy all these custom inputs for every single button, you only actually have to replace the ones that you need to. Another accessibility benefit is actually sharing the controls between two different people. So an example being Sightless Combat, who I know is watching today. He's a well-known blind gamer. He uses Copilot to play with another person, so he can use his controller for controlling the bits that he is able to play independently, with somebody else helping with the areas that he can't. And benefits outside of a disability as well. For example, if you've got a little toddler about to throw a tantrum because he's not being able to get past the boss in Lego, that means you can sneak in there, pick up a second controller and help him out a bit without him having to like give up and hand over his controller, you know. It's really, really nice functionality. Just one of those ideas that is like, why didn't someone think of this before, you know? So it's nice and simple functionality to implement as well. So it's amazing that Stadia have implemented this. I'd love to see this come to the other platforms as well. Speaking of other platforms and speaking of the adaptive controller, we also have the launch of this. This is a device called the Flex by Hori, so it's the Hori Flex, and this is a rough equivalent of the Xbox Adaptive Controller, but for the Nintendo Switch. What both the controllers have in common is that they are Switch interfaces. So the terminology here is a bit confusing. I don't mean an interface for the Nintendo Switch, I mean an interface for accessibility switches, which is those two buttons that you can see at the front there. So an accessibility switch is a device used by people who can't operate with traditional input devices like a mouse or a keyboard or a gamepad. And it's basically anything at all that sends a simple on-off signal down a wire, like an open-close signal, that connects up to a 3.5 inch mini jack. So that can be something like those the buttons on the table in the picture. It could be a button mounted to a wheelchair headrest. It could be a tube to blow into, an infrared blink detector. It's really nice, simple, powerful accessibility standard that both these devices were designed to support. So they have a whole bunch of ports along the front that allow you to connect accessibility switches to, and basically let you build your own custom gaming setup tailored to your own needs. There's also USBs on either side for connecting joysticks to. You can see one of those hooked up here. And it has a few things that actually surpass the Xbox Adaptive Controller as well. So it has integrated eye gaze support. And it also has the ability to layer up multiple inputs onto a single button. It also has some things that aren't up to par for what the Xbox Adaptive Controller. So the support for joysticks is very limited. Like the Adaptive Controller lets you connect any HID controller at all. This only has a small number of supported controllers that you can sticks that you can connect to it. It also doesn't have that Copilot functionality that I mentioned before, the ability to pair it with a regular controller. But it does have one thing in common with the adaptive controller, which is so important, which is that it just looks like a part of the regular ecosystem. So this here is comparing the Hori Flex to the Hori Mini fighting stick. You can see it just looks like part of the same family. It looks like regular, legitimate gaming technology, whereas assistive technology often just looks like a piece of medical technology. So actually having this equitable design actually sends a really powerful statement in itself about inclusion and about value. So I mentioned some of the differences between the two devices. If you want to know more about that, here is a link, tinyurl.com/hori-flex. This is a really nice breakdown written by Barry Ellis of OneSwitch, who's actually speaking at this event. As that's breaking down all the various pros and cons of the different devices. Some really lovely stuff in there. So next up, information. Like I said, information for gamers and information for developers, starting with an event. So this is Spawn Point. This is a conference run by Whoop, which is a streaming organisation in Austria, run out of Vienna. This is a accessibility conference aimed at their viewing demographic of gamers. And this went in really hard on representation of personal stories from disabled gamers, and also some developers speaking there as well. This is a really nice event. I hope this is going to continue to grow and continue over the years to come. And actually, on a similar note, I can't say too much because it isn't announced yet, but this event was like kind of mixed, like some talks English, some talks German language. There's actually due to be a dedicated, like solely German language accessibility event happening later on this year. That's as much as I can say. I know a few people watching already know about it, but as soon as information about that can be shared, it will. Moving on to something that we've seen steadily growing and progressing over the years, starting actually back in 2017, when Evolve became the first AAA game to share accessibility information about the game on the game's website. That's grown and spread. EA building their accessibility portal, followed by other companies like Ubisoft and Microsoft, now spreading further. So this is PlayStation. PlayStation are now including accessibility information and pages on their website. Activision as well. So this is accessibility information here about Crash Bandicoot 4. This is very quickly becoming standard, and it is critically important for people to be able to make informed decisions, informed purchase decisions. But the other side of this is that it's not just about the information, it's about when you get the information. So you need to be sharing this information as early as possible. And I think the best example we've seen of that so far is Phoenix Rising, that launched only a few months ago, but they published their accessibility information for the game way back in September. So this was like 3 months or so before the game even launched. That is really important, because it's not just important for people to be able to make informed purchase decisions, it's also important for people to get on board the hype train, you know, like all those lovingly crafted pieces of marketing materials that you're putting out there. It's really hard for someone to get excited about a game and put their pre-orders in if they don't know if they're going to be able to play it or not. So try and put this information out as early as you can. I know things are always subject to change, but you know, you can be transparent about it, talk about how things are ambitions and subject to change and stuff, but just whatever you can manage to get out earlier in the process is super valuable. The flip side of this is information flowing in the other direction, so flowing from gamers to developers. And again, this is something that's been steadily growing over the past years. This latest addition to the family is Insomniac. So this is a screenshot of their existing support portal, where they're adding in an extra category dedicated to accessibility feedback. And this kind of thing, especially when it's something like this, where you already have an existing system that all you're really doing is just adding in an extra checkbox, adding in an extra drop down. This can be a really cost-effective way of getting really valuable accessibility input directly into the hands of your developers. Next up, something from the IGEA, that's the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, which is the equivalent of like Yuki and Tiger. It is the industry body covering the games industry across Australia and New Zealand. They put together a pack of accessibility resources. So this is basically like 10-12 pages of links to like guidelines, guides, articles, and resources, all kinds of really useful stuff. It's a really handy resource. The URL for it is there at the bottom, tinyurl.com/IGEA-pack. So check that out. For something a little more focused, Oculus launched their VRCs for accessibility. The VRCs are basically Oculus's certification requirements for any game that launches on the platform. The accessibility ones are an exception to this. They're actually not requirements, they're recommendations. So you're not required to implement them. and there aren't very many of them. It's this kind of like their first pass at them, just like an initial small set of them. But the fact that they are part of these VRCs means that they are tested for. So that means that actually when you go to launch your game on the Oculus platform, you can actually get feedback on accessibility directly from Oculus, which is a big step. So a company that's a little bit more ahead on this, who's been doing similar things but at a broader scale, is Xbox. So Xbox have had for a number of years now internal accessibility standards and guidelines for their first party developers. A couple of years ago they released these publicly for anyone to use in the form of the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines website. They've actually just back in February published a really big revamp of these guidelines, covering both the breadth of what's covered by them and also the depth of them, the level of detail and the kind of things that are communicated about them as well, and the kind of examples of good practices in there. I'm not going to talk too much about these because we actually have a whole talk about them tomorrow afternoon from Caitlin from Xbox. But there is the URL there if you want to check out the guidelines if you're not already familiar. It's aka.ms/X, And at the same time, they launched the counterpart to this, which is an accessibility testing service. So this is a paid service by which anyone who wants to launch a game on Xbox or PC can actually submit their build to Xbox and get a fast turnaround report, basically evaluating that game against these updated accessibility guidelines. And the testing itself is done by subject matter experts and disabled gamers who are in paid positions for Microsoft evaluating this stuff. So there's all kinds of angles on which this is a really lovely program. And again, I'm not going to talk about too much about this because there's a whole talk about it tomorrow from Brannon. So if you want to know more about either of those things, the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines or the Xbox Testing Program, tune in tomorrow afternoon. Next up, games, which is what all this is leading to, right? This is what the hardware and the information and the guidelines, the recommendations, the testing is all about, is just making games more accessible. So there's been a steady march of progress. I mentioned The Last of Us 2 at the start. It's going to take a little while for the influence of that game in particular to filter through, especially given like the amount of time involved in AAA development in particular. It has already had some influence felt. A few games implementing similar functionality to some of the things it did. Even outside of games, actually, even within like a month of that game launching, I noticed a piece of productivity software that had implemented high contrast functionality based on what one of the developers had seen while playing The Last of Us 2. And that's something that really excites me about game accessibility in particular, is not only the direct benefit that it has on games, but the sheer amount of creative problem-solving ability that is embedded in studios all over the world, that if some of that is applied to some of these accessibility problems, the solutions can actually be widely applicable across other industries as well and help improve the world in general. But so for what we've been seeing, there have been a few trends. There's a few features which are really rapidly becoming commonplace, things like QTE toggles, remapping, colorblind support, subtitle presentation. That has been one that's been really exciting for me to see because that's something that was advocated for hard for so many years. So seeing that actually becoming standard is really, really cool. So this means things like being able to change the font size, configure the background, turn the speaker names on and off, that kind of stuff. There's also been an ongoing snowballing effect in two areas of the industry in particular. Firstly, in AAA sector, games that were influenced as part of that first generation, influenced by and alongside Uncharted 4, those games coming out, those games going on to influence others and others again, and just it growing and growing. And the same thing in the indie sector from Celeste. Celeste was hugely influential. A whole bunch of other games, particularly in the same genre, indie platformers, copying the exact feature set, and other games copying it and adding their own, and then like the next generation of indie games, the indie platformers, which are copying that second generation, adding their own again, and it's really quickly snowballing. That is very exciting to see the pace at which, especially because they're like quick turnaround indie games, that's evolving very, very quickly. So this is the point where I'm going to cheat and just read from a list. So this is a very quick, like non-exhaustive list, just a few examples of some of the games that have been doing nice stuff over the past 6 months. Going Under, Hollow Vista, Candy Crush Friends Saga, Crash Bandicoot 4, Ikenfell, FIFA 21, Star Wars Squadrons, Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory, NHL 21. A whole bunch of games that came out of the One Button Game Jam, especially a nice one called Chill Balloon. Watch Dogs Legion, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Black Ops Cold War, Rainbow Six Neon Dawn, Minecraft, Dark Pictures Little Hope, Sackboy Big Adventure, Haven, Phoenix Rising, the suite of iGaze games from Special Effect, iMine 2, Street Cleaner, Destruction All Stars, Minute Fun Racer, Bravely Default 2, Revita, Loop Hero, Warframe, Everhood, It Takes Two. Check out any of these games if you want to see some really nice accessibility stuff. I'm going to paste that list directly into the chat on Discord. Like I said, there's a few clear trends in that, but what you can really see from that list is just that it covers so much stuff. It covers everything from like promotional, like marketing mini games, to indie passion projects, through to like the biggest AAA blockbusters. It's a really clear sign that accessibility is really becoming a fundamental part of the fabric of every area of game development. And why that's possible is because of people. You know, these features and considerations don't just pop into existence by themselves. And part of that is people for whom accessibility is their full-time role. So you don't have to go back very far. If you go back to 2015, back then there was 2 people who were working in like platform accessibility, but in terms of people actually working on accessibility in games, there were zero people who had it as their actual like full-time in-house job. Now there's like something like 30 to 40. That's not people who like have accessibility on the side. There's like a big army of those as well, but people for whom that is like their full-time sole in-house responsibility. So that is a huge growth, and that includes 3 hires just in the last month alone. Oh, and I skipped a bit. Sorry, before I talk about hires, I wanted to actually call out one game in particular off that list, Spider-Man Miles Morales. The original Spider-Man game was doing some very nice things for accessibility back in the day. In particular, Spider-Man and God of War that came out at the same time. Those were the 2 top-selling PlayStation games of the year. So the fact that those 2 games were also games that had put a lot of effort into accessibility conclusively put to bed that quite prevalent myth amongst developers and gamers that accessibility in some way dilutes your creative vision and makes your game less commercially viable. They did some cool stuff. Then Miles Morales came along. Miles Morales really pushed the bar. They've got all kinds of cool accessibility functionality in there, including some things that actually build upon and surpass things that The Last of Us 2 did, like its high contrast functionality, which is actually fully configurable, so you can like choose the different colors for like your enemies and teammates and that kind of thing. And alongside this is the reason I wanted to shout them out, was the way that they talked about this. So they actually had like a full tweet storm. This was like a 15 tweet long thread showcasing all the various different bits of accessibility functionality in the game. And some of it was funny, like this example on the screen. This is talking about how its high contrast mode lets you have flat shading, and for people who need the image described, this is a picture of like 1960s cartoon of Spider-Man, flat cell shaded. But in general, like it was just hype this whole thread, and it was amazing to see accessibility treated as part of that launch hype, as something that people treated equally as something that people should be excited about with the launch, leading up to the launch of the game. And actually Amy, who is speaking tomorrow, she summed it up a lot more concisely and eloquently than me. It's so joyous to see such celebration of accessibility. I couldn't agree more. So back to the people. I was talking about hires. There have been 3 hires just in the past month alone. There's Rodrigo Sanchez, who has joined Emilia Ain at Square Enix. So Square Enix now actually has an accessibility team. It's no longer a solo accessibility commando over there. A second person, I hoped I was going to be able to talk about this today, but there's still got a few like finer details being nailed out with their contract and stuff, so I can't talk about it yet, but hopefully they'll be able to announce their position in the coming days. And lastly, Morgan, who I'm sure a few of you here know, Morgan is now working for the Odd Gentleman. Morgan's role is really important. So up to this point, that like 30-40 people I was talking about, that's people working for big companies, working for publishers, people who have like a team of accessibility QA and like an accessibility lead and stuff. The Odd Gentleman is not a big publisher. The Odd Gentleman is not even a big studio. They have a headcount of 20. So for a company that's got a headcount of 20, to dedicate one of those headcount to accessibility is a big step for the industry, and I think is indicative of the direction that things are going to be heading in the future. So on to the last thing, I'm going to finish up talking about awards. So representation of accessibility in industry awards is something that people have been advocating for a lot for a long time, at least the past 10 years, with kind of limited success. Every now and then something's happened, but this year it exploded. So we have the Can I Play That Awards, which is in its second year. Tiger, which for a few years now, its diversity category has had a specific accessibility call out. All the other ones you're looking at here are new. They all appeared for the first time this year. So top right, there's the Gaming Accessibility Awards hosted by Steve Spawn and Alana Pierce. The PlayStation blog adding an accessibility category to their existing annual awards. IGN doing the same, adding an accessibility category to their existing annual awards. PlayStation Lifestyle, exactly the same, adding an accessibility category to their annual awards. And I think those last two in particular are really important because they're like big, widely read publications. It's not just about the value of recognizing and awarding the people making the progress, but it's also about the awareness raising. And I can't really talk about the value of awareness raising without talking about the Game Awards. So the Game Awards also added an accessibility category to their awards. And the Game Awards is, I'm sure everyone watching this already knows this, but just in case anyone doesn't, the Game Awards is the main event of the gaming calendar. It's basically like the gaming's Oscars. And this year, the Game Awards were watched by 80 million people. That is an incredible amount of awareness raising and then celebration of accessibility across the gaming community in general. And one other thing I'd like to highlight on here, the game in the middle, Hyperdot. So Hyperdot actually, across the awards on the previous slide as well, Hyperdot actually picked up, I think, 6 nominations and 1 win as well. And Hyperdot is made by one person. It's like a solo indie developer making this game. So I think that is, like, for any smaller indies watching this, I think that's a really powerful illustration of just how much ability you have to actually push the industry forwards. And alongside this, complementing the awards themselves, the Game Awards also launched the Future Class. So the Future Class was kind of a complementary program alongside the awards where they wanted to give recognition to people across the games industry who they felt were helping to push the industry in a positive direction. This meant recognizing 50 people from across the industry. Of those 50 people, 10 of them, so a full like 20% of the Game Awards Future Class, were people working in accessibility. People like Cherry Thompson and Nomad, Morgan Baker, and so on. This was really wonderful to see. So this recognition of the importance of accessibility and the celebration of where we've got to is really important, but it's also important to recognise that we are not there yet. We are still really at the beginning. We're still a long way off from the point where we need to be, where anyone can just pick up any game and have at least a reasonable expectation that they aren't going to be unnecessarily locked out. But we are getting there. As you can see from the kind of stuff in this presentation, a lot of progress is being made. People care, people are learning, people are collaborating. And that hopefully is something you're going to be able to take from the next couple of days, not just in terms of the information presented and the things you'll be able to take back and work on in your day-to-day jobs, but also the connections that you'll make, the people that you've met. A lot of the progress that has happened has been because of that collaboration, and how accessibility is a topic that seems to allow people to kind of step around the traditional barriers and talk more openly with each other and collaborate more openly on things. So please, as well as the talks, make use of Discord, chat with people, and hopefully you will be able to take some good stuff from the next couple of days. So enjoy, and I will see you on the chat. Thank you.